There is a collusion with only people allowed to be heard speaking about black and white, and making sure no one is allowed to be without their having their voice changed to fake what they say, including digital evidences with FBI. FBI Director Robert Luskin has rules of worse than criminal incompetence. Former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, and the James Comey lying to the American people with World Trade Center predicate acts. The World Trade Center is all kinds of ways criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrong. They got an old woman sitting there. She tells her she doesn't feel comfortable. She called it white supremacy. If she wants to call it that, you guys told her to call it that. In other words, then you're attacking her. Then someone tries to do it legitimately. You guys look at the comments on this thing with Joe Rogan taking a comment on the lady speaking about in other words, oh, in other words, clearer than day, New York City. Look at the buildings behind rappers in rap videos. Why do you think they're so angry and get away with it? In other words, because there is no jobs worthy, and any jobs worthy of anything, they're criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrong. They can't defend their roles with that and afford to be, let alone to protract the short words with convictions proper by the identity the science to share. Black pupils. They cannot see the whites of eyes. They must be shown, discern. In other words, get me out fake conversations with WFSB, WTNH sources, and Fox Connecticut news sources. Get them on paper with the interbranch. They have some black KKK Confederate flag, Latino theme, Italian theme, Korean theme, Russian theme, Ukraine theme, people next to body dumping spots theme, all brought up at the same time, untimely deaths. Why caught them forcing child abusers, leaders, and kids? You guys are missing all that's recorded by them attaching people, having attached them to fake conversations with themselves, the news and the interbranch at the same time. The only three branches of government, clearer than day, we can observe how they were used criminally, foreign influence, tactical delusions. The breaching method shows them that, how we could observe that, and how they need to use any and everything that comes before them to hide that, including putting their kids as fake motivations. A breaching method measures and maintains that the outcome/S. They have them right in the news, planting identity theft, fraud, slanders, and relative delusions. You guys are delusions rot too when you speak about black and white, when you speak about what you think is debatable. You better understand that James Madison's plan, they had to force everyone to help. In other words, everyone you guys are calling our founders, we don't know they're our founders. The only one we know for certain was our founder was James Madison. They didn't have the security to classify anyone else's name. Everyone was being measured and maintained not just but by internationally monitored conversations, ones that had roles measured and maintained even with slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies, and then America's founders were born. You guys think it's debatable, legitimately, if someone says the databases were all criminally foreign influenced, tactically delusions raw. It's not science the way they're using the people's words, leaving out what our founders declassified about that breaching method that was measuring, maintaining everyone, pretending to an extent they had free speech, even though they didn't. Otherwise, that body was sensed. And anybody that didn't tell on that body trying to do other syntactically was sensed to and adapted to easily, including if the body was a majority of people, including if it was everyone. That's one of the reasons the breaching method had different countries, it had entrenched slavery rules even, sickly distinctly through the different countries, through the different roles, the different international companies. In other words, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, originally Latin America's founders were born. All those people in that list were styles of logic, natures of logic, needed to value the same sequence shifts, needed to value the same styles and nature of debate. Collusion / that's the breaching method hides behind and through. Then they can't go back and afford to discern what actually was the value of what is recorded. You guys don't even allow people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington or what brought up the counter extortion of everyone with James Madison's plan. and the founders behind him, plural, and see president slash chief, because we have to discern how sickly distinctly the breaching method sabotages syntactical appreciation of Native American difference and syntax and impositions and our own, because this breaching method is inseparable from all impositions, all positives and negatives. It was inseparable from appreciation of them syntactically. Has the names of the people of the sciences individually grouped and together. Self-valued collusion within that styles of logic, natures of logic that can't defend that without self-valuing, being and having been replaced. Things that our founders left declassified for us to understand, like about how one of the things all those laws were sickly distinctly against every difference, therefore every human difference against women, against black peoples, white survivors. Excuse me, all those multi races and differences of the fronts, they're all equally valuable as a human fact, human nature breaching method. A hyper criminal foreign influences. How are you? So in other words, I'll put a link to a video with Joe Rogan. I'm disappointed, but I understand it, because Joe Rogan and Americans A through Z came through campuses that were criminally foreign influenced, tactically delusions raw, and replacing tools self-valued roles, replacing and having been replaced with James Madison and our founders communicated about how they all used his plan before he was a president. Then once he was a president slash chief too, they declassified for us why and how he still didn't have free speech. People don't vote on things like slavery. See, people that pretended other, when their logic and their nature logic, their campuses, they have to pretend not to realize by pretending they think that democracy and voting is value that it isn't. We're supposed to get the Constitution unabridged, and we're supposed to get free speech of equality. That would, get right through that. I'm not a doctor. Romulus is not my real name, but Romulus and Remus is about science of the republic for which we stand. It's abridged. And there are proofs that might also be cipher, like not really what the ancients, how the ancients taught about the ancient history with some story. So that accords with the people need to pretend to believe and really believe now, because of the way they've been telling history. They can't defend that and afford history to be told the way our founders left it to be understood. Before America's founders were born, there was a breaching method that had even roles with slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies. Had already been sustained against Native Americans. They weren't even Native Americans yet. Had tactically denatured the earth at countries A through Z, at campuses A through Z, and exceptions that the original campuses relied upon, because nature shows us to rely upon functions it has. Like, for example, it is functional by nature, how nature's complete identity, how its identity is invisible but still discernible, slash hyper invisible but still discernible, as three distinct identities of relationship that it has to itself, just like a complete identity of any cell of anyone's body, any part of one's body. It has a cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, slash S. And the body of value progression is valuing water and its elements and gases in their elements. And there's a value progression coming through. These are the parts of the rest of the complete nature of the identity that is generating totally different species bodies, each one of a whole bunch of individual bodies. Has it that way so we can discern its individual identity of value progression natures. And it's a special difference with Earth's concentrated relativity to its complete identity, with a temporary concentrated value slash value progression. and it is further positive onto and as itself here, or it demonstrates with force space nature transfer the second we are or have been or will be, the second we will be using systems abridged from its own, let alone tactically abridged in all self-valued roles. A breaching method made that outcome only remembered, so it could hide behind and through that. It has each age, each quality, each age of a fact-achieving nature, each age and nature of campus, forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to self-value things that nature itself shows us with black people's whites of eyes to be replaced, and for other things, others ourselves, to be blamed were nature itself and America's founders. People don't know about the America's founders part because they left out what they declassified. They read their words pretending that's science. And they get away with it by pretending the value of experts is what it isn't. The lawyers are criminally pointable as tactically delusions wrought worse than criminal incompetence. There is Native Americans say, some Native Americans say that we must read each other's dreams, especially when there's a breaching method that is not countries A through Z, and it knows that countries A through Z can only be operated by the locations, areas, and states everywhere the species body is, and it made them only remember it right through. It made them blame other things, others themselves, for what it caused to keeps. Like what it caused, like slavery. We're supposed to blame the breaching method. Our founders wanted nothing to do with slavery. We're supposed to blame the breaching method. Our founders wanted us to understand how there were internationally monitored conversations. And there were the sense and sensibilities also hyper additionally with this of overt criminal enterprises, of private ones, of countries A through Z. Everyone's grouped and independent species body systems now tactile from the only one directed by nature for us to understand. We are unity as a human species body, an independent body of a whole bunch of independent bodies, unified. Remember, it teaches us about unity and independence, nature itself. But tactile then we are allowed to, all the experts are with syntax tactile from its own. So when they can't defend that and afford to have short words with convictions proper by nature itself, what is true always, we wouldn't have left out how we have black pupils, whites of eyes, how the breaching method reassigned with that is communicated by, when nature communicates with that, when nature is not only itself as criminal insidiousness, nature itself shows us that too. The difference between criminal insidiousness, natures of peace, and hyper peace, for example. Nature shows us the main topic of discussion tonight, excuse me, in a video, an old woman was trying to say that there's white supremacy, and everyone's like harassing her and trying to get her logic, and she's saying, "Well, I don't feel comfortable about it." Because they're not being honest with her. They're telling her they're going to pretend the other, but they're not being honest. And they have delusions. That's why she's uncomfortable too. Apparently. But also demonstrably, the lawyers have failed her. Lawyers were supposed to interpret for people when they say white supremacy. In other words, we're supposed to say the suburbs were designed by a torture, extortion, and fact-achieving nature slavery method that was designed to keep people. The only way they could counter and try to overcome negative value nature, the real cause /S of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures would be if the self-value collusions with the breaching methods employment of the only means to overcome that is to have self-value rules with its employments of criminal and citizens' natures of positive means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures, not real positives. So nature shows us this. Our founders show us this. They did not have real free speech. and we're supposed to interpret this for them. They had to declassify. People get away with, like, the people who are attacking the schools and the schools that say, oh, well, our founders owned slaves. They're supposed to explain how the databases were criminally foreign influenced, and we didn't even know who our founders were. We just know that there was a plural of them, and they were strong enough to make people counter-extorted inside more than 13 colonies, which had already been roles sustained with even things like slavery. We even see even Native Americans against Native Americans, even though they weren't called Native Americans. They weren't given that unity yet. And we still aren't given that unity. We were given we were given a unity, but we were forced to it. And we are forced to get ourselves on a bridge. But rather than do that, we have the names of the people, the sciences, self-valued being, and haven't been stated collusion/S. We can't even have men be honest about and not group up on a little old black woman, let alone a whole bunch of old black women and little black girls in New York City. I'm not saying it's all just black. It's just concentrated and unfolded that way because the only voices for the law, the only voices for the sciences, were people that came through campuses, grouped. So the beginning of the Old Testament says, only defend right here, for example, per science. I'm not asking even for faith. It says only defend right here where the names of the people of the sciences will come together in the part that comes before it. The Quran also has a part up front that says all that matters. It says all that matters if someone's honest about their use of the name of the scientific value for that identity of value progression. Doesn't say it like that, but it says they're the one generating, obviously, the one generating individual species bodies of individuals, so we could discern its own. And one of the things black male and female is about. Totally different species bodies have male and female. The parts of the complete identity of space come with that, where we could discern its complete identity. The rest of its complete identity is manifest as parts, inseparable from its singular part. But it's that way also further hyper additionally, inseparable from the individual finite parts of ourselves, and then distinctly, non-distinctly, as from the group parts, and the active nature part, and the simultaneous and our progressive part. So we are a quality of diffusion. We're all space nature's identity is making more of itself through us. Like as if it's like a tip of the piece of your hair is not your complete identity, but it is anyway. And the reason that is true is because everything is a semi-nature relationship to its complete identity. And English was revealed to teach this. But see, people made experts have meaning that value they don't. People have passions and emotions that are criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw, and as psychopaths. So that black woman in the link to the video with Joe Rogan, she could discern that they are psychopaths with their positive treatments and with their negative treatments. In other words, but the experts on the psychopaths are still psychopaths. There's still all kinds of organized crimes with psychiatry. I'm not a doctor, but they're criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw, and ones with badges. The FBI, the CIA, they are worse than criminal incompetence. They have the audacity to sit back and let people speak like that. They're the books. See the book depository reportedly, demonstrably involved with the narratives regarding the assassination of one of our presidents/chiefs. The book depository has roles with these natures of organized crimes associated. with keeping people with the audacity, also the delusions, not capable of discerning it. In other words, pretend that things are debatable. We're supposed to interpret for her when she says there's white supremacy. Supposed to say there's a breaching method. There's a breaching method here. In other words, we don't have to label it a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, but we should do that too. In other words, and we're supposed to say our founders communicated for us to understand about how there were roles with so many bad things at once, and if everyone spoke about any part about it, let alone group parts of it, they would be sensed by everyone else who would be in trouble with them. There's a breaching method. Forgiveness is so we don't leave out the breaching method. Get them on paper, please. I'm one of the people who was next to the World Trade Center towers the morning of the World Trade Center attack. There are too many fake people speaking when others speak. You change and fake our words. They say, oh, well, look, that was in the database and this person said that. For fake things. Get them on paper. Get me off a fake conversation with the news, too. Let's go. Chop, chop. Fix the fake news about the World Trade Center attack. Let's go.